Hi there, I'm Brian Joyce, and welcome to the Brian A. Joyce Report. We're filming here at Milton's Fuller Village, and I did just get a cup of tea. I have very little criticism of this beautiful facility, but just realized they're using styrofoam. My daughter Maggie has asked me to introduce legislation to ban styrofoam, so if Maggie, I doubt you're going to watch the show anyhow, but if you do, we're going to get on that. We have a wonderful guest here today. We try to bring you some, interesting persons involved in politics, and probably one of the most interesting people and a very delightful gentleman is Christy Mihos, who is a Republican candidate for governor. We're going to have some spirited races this year. It appears we're going to have a very spirited Republican primary. We're going to have a Democratic primary, and we're going to have a independent candidate. So we have a number of folks that want to be chief executive officer of the state. Given our financial situation, I wonder why, but perhaps our guest Christy Mihos can tell us why he wants to be governor, and tell people a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Senator, and thanks for the invite today, and it's great to meet your dad, who's a resident here, and they don't make them like that anymore. Those guys were hardwired, totally different than we are, but I'm a son of Massachusetts, born in Brockton, Massachusetts. I have always lived here, went through the Brockton public school system, graduated from Stonehill College, then went on into the business world. I helped build up a company called Christie's Markets. At one point we had over 150 stores in the 6 New England states. We were really, really doing well. And at one point, so well that we were just expanding all the time. And really, I know it's a tough time in state government and all, but you really can't grow a business or really take advantage and opportunities of what's going on in the economy in great times. In bad times, you get some great buys, and that's what we were very lucky back in the day to do that. So we get to a certain point, and one night in April 1997, a judge had let a person out on personal recognizance who should have been behind bars on a number of violations, and gun violations certainly. And he walked into our store right on Jersey Street, right near Fenway Park, and he murdered my store manager. And my brother and I had always had a pact that if anything ever happened to one of our people, in that vein certainly, we'd never had any type of action like that against any one of our people. And we decided that we just couldn't go through that again, and we sold the company to 7-Eleven, kept all the real estate, but sold the company. So, but we were, I started in that business back when I was 4 years old, working for my grandfather and my dad and my uncle. I would pack eggs. Eggs used to come in a gross, box, and you just pack them in half dozen and dozen containers. Sort bottles. It was Simpson Spring. Was basically the only bottler back then in this really in this area. They were right down the street here, and the other thing was I would take out the trash, and after doing that for a few hours, which seemed like days to a 4- and 5-year-old, they would give me a bottle of Orange Crush, and to this day I've never had, nor do I ever want to see another bottle of Orange Crush, because that was bottled in Brockton, and they could get it cheap, and so the kid got the thing that was readily available. But I got really lucky. We worked real hard with my dad. My dad was a World War II veteran in the United States Navy, also a year in Korea on destroyer escorts, and he was a real taskmaster. The kids of the Depression, they hated waste, and they loved saving money, and they just figured out ways to do that even better. And the harder we worked, the luckier we got. And my brother and I got into the business, and we just got, like I said, we just got lucky, and we really worked hard.
Isn't that terrific? So, you talked a little bit about your education going through the Brockton schools and then down to Stonehill, but it sounds like the better education came at your father's knee, and perhaps your grandfather as well. That's terrific. The lessons, the work ethic.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know what you're talking about in terms of the children of the Depression. I remember, my father, whom you just met, Jerry, he would save the string that the newspapers, I delivered newspapers as a boy, and the bundle would come in tied up in string, and he would save that for further use. I mean, you get down to the basement, and it's like, finally, when we moved up here, it's like, Dad, why were you saving this for 30 years, But it was just a different ethic, and it's great to have gotten that from your dad and your grandfather, that work ethic as well as that thrift. Some valuable lessons.
They were, and I always kept my mouth shut and my ears open. But I remember one day my dad took me behind one of the supermarkets we had opened in Holbrook, and he said, "I want to show you where your profits are." And we had back then like 3 big bins: a meat bin, a trash bin, and a produce bin, where all the trash was. We didn't have dumpsters in those days. And I said, "Dad, what are you taking me back here for? This is all old meat and everything." He says, "I want to show you where your profits are." We had a snack bar in that store, and it was a big store. So he would reach through these big 44-gallon barrels, and he pulled out like 5 or 6 steaks, and he says, "Here, this is your profit." He threw them at me basically, and I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "These should have been ground up, a couple days ago and sold as hamburgers or cheeseburgers or at the snack bar." He says, "There's your profit." He said, "I want you to learn from that." So then we'd make our way over to the produce bin, and he'd see 5 or 6 heads of lettuce that the outside had gone a little bit brown. He says, "These should have been done up in coleslaw and for the deli or the snack bar." And that's just how their mind worked. That they had nothing, they lost everything, and they started with 0. And they came back from the war. Luckily, a few of them had the GI Bill and all, which was the greatest bill that ever happened in this country. But they just were great role models. They never wanted anything for themselves. It was always for the children and to pass down. So again, there's not a lot of people that are hardwired that way any longer.
One of the other things you said was interesting. You talked about in a difficult economic time, adversity sometimes creates opportunity, and you used it in the context of expanding the number of stores. But here in government, clearly we have some significant challenges in terms of revenues plummeting, fewer people working. I think 60% of our revenue comes from the income tax. So we have fewer people working, income tax goes down. 20% comes from the sales tax. So we have fewer people purchasing goods. So that revenue's down. So we have some adversity. What opportunities does that present us in government?
A tremendous amount of opportunities, but it's got to be a different government that we've been weaned on, and we see each and every day. I'm the only gubernatorial candidate that has worked for help finance and get signatures for question 1, which will be on the November 2nd, 2010 ballot. Ballot question 1 will be a rollback of the state sales tax to 3%, not 5, but 3. We're at 6 1/4 right now, and I saw you wince when I said 3. But really, what it will do is it'll make us more competitive with every state in and around us. So if you're doing business down in Attleboro or Franklin, and against someone in Rhode Island, they're at 7, we're at 3. They're coming over to buy our goods and services, certainly. If you're, it'll put...
So the sales tax in Rhode Island is 7%?
Yes.
And so you think that if we drop it to 3%, the net effect would be positive because people coming to shop in our state
without question.
to escape that tax?
Look what's happening up in the Merrimack Valley. I mean, that's where our real unemployment is up there, because we're dealing with a competitor who gives everything away for free, basically, in New Hampshire. When we had 20-something stores in New Hampshire, and our marketing department's credo up there was "for free or you die." You know what I mean? You're not in business if you try to make a profit in New Hampshire. That's how tight that market is. So I think we'll be able to stay some of that, the traffic going over to New Hampshire, and keep those jobs in Massachusetts. It means $688 to the average taxpayer annually in their pocket by rolling back the sales tax. It will create 39,000 new jobs, and the amount of will be so much more competitive than if you're in Western Massachusetts, New York, right? They're infinitely higher than we would be at 3%. So we've got to give. We need a stimulus for the rest of us, because none of us really got any of the federal stimulus funds or the TOP funds. I know you didn't, and I certainly
know
I didn't.
It's interesting because there are some economists that we're switching now from state to federal. You're running for governor, not for Congress or the Senate. But speaking of the federal stimulus, there are a lot of economists that suggest that money would have been or could have been better spent or realized by the populace just through tax cuts, rather than the expenditures. And here's where it does tie in now to the position you want, Governor, those stimulus funds that the governor controls for road and bridge projects, for example. Would you rather, if you were governor, have a block of funds from the federal government to work on infrastructure improvements around the state, to economic development, or do you think it's better spent through tax cuts, federal tax cuts?
I think the people really need to put money in their pockets right now. That creates jobs. When people have money in their pockets, they spend. And as a small business person, I know if customers are happy and Main Street is happy, the whole country is happy. Right now, Main Street is hurting. Wall Street's is pretty damn happy with what's going on down there and the bonuses and you name it down there. But Main Street and the middle class are getting eviscerated. You've got to have tax cuts. You have to have money in their pocket. And my sense, Senator, is that from April to October, there's going to be so much road and bridge construction being done in Massachusetts. The whole state will be in gridlock. Yeah. And you know, everybody will be working at that point. But will people really see it for what it is? Right?
You know, I got to say something for the people in the watching. I have 5 children, and I was talking to one of my children, Mikey, who's likes politics. And he said, what gets people elected, Dad? And I said, I think it's a combination of likability and ability, and often between the two, likability trumps. In other words, I think if the populace thinks that a person has the requisite ability, they're not going to go to the smartest guy as long as the guy's capable. They go to the person they like the most. And you have something about you that I don't often see in politicians or in other candidates with whom I've had the pleasure of working. You're just a likable guy. And when I hear people on your side of the aisle that often talk tax cuts and stuff, they do it with such a vengeance. You do it with a twinkle in your eye and a smile on your face. So it's refreshing. And I also think that you would have the ability to work well with Republicans and Democrats alike.
Well, you know what? I think the day of blaming the Democrats or Republicans, that is over.
I agree with you.
Unless you have solutions right now, I would love to work with you because I think you're a fiscal conservative, sort of a conservative type of guy, and you're looking to give back basically, but in the right way. Total accountability. That's what people really want right now. And so I'm looking at things like you don't have a registry in the town of Milton, right?
What term?
Registry of Motor Vehicles.
No.
Right.
No.
So we have 13 right now. I want to close them all and locate them all in the city and town halls and have the state just be the service bureau. And so you can go down to your town hall or your city hall and do all your registry business right there and keep the money at the local level so the locals will have some local aid coming back. Just little things like that.
Well, I got to tell you, it's interesting because we have a model program, speaking of the Registry of Motor Vehicles, wherein we allow AAA to actually, we've outsourced some of the work that had been done previously by the Registry of Motor Vehicles. And to me, it's a far more effective and efficient way to deliver government services. And yet, if you go to Registry of Motor Vehicles, because of the budget shortfalls, people are in line for 2 hours and getting ticked off. And so I've tried to expand that program and, in fact, let your local insurance agent, who would love to, welcome the traffic,
they would
allow them to be able to do some of these kind of mundane tasks. And yet I do, within my own party, meet with a fair amount of resistance. And it's, change is often difficult to effectuate in government. The big ship of government kind of turns slowly,
Very slowly.
So now you're in a Republican primary.
I am.
So that's the first hurdle. You have to get past your primary opponent. It seems that most of the Republican establishment's with the other guy.
Good.
You're the
outsider.
Challenge. Yeah, well, you're the outsider and the underdog in that fight. So how do you beat him? How do you win?
Well, you do. Certainly, you don't change what you're doing. I mean, I'm running a populist campaign. I've always been an outsider. No one's ever going to confuse me with being the insider in this race. But I look at there are stark differences between my Republican opponent and myself. He was in government for 10 years with the Wells-Cellucci administration. He wrote the Big Dig Highway Finance Plan. He got the biggest bailout in the history of the Commonwealth with Harvard Pilgrim. I asked people just to look at your last 10 years of healthcare premiums. Double-digit increases each and every year for the last 10 years. And that is just, again, devastating the middle class. It's hurting small business. There's no competition. Even the bill that Romney started his presidential campaign on, Healthcare for All, in 2006, no cost containment provision in that whatsoever. So people just can't afford what healthcare and these HMO executives and Partners Healthcare and all are doing to us right now. There's got to be some blowback on that. And I'm running against a guy that gave you 7 periodic increases on your tolls from now until the year 2038, and increase your premiums and all. And this, I'm running against the consummate insider. I'm the outsider.
So let's talk a little bit about each of those, because it's interesting. You're running in a Republican primary. Christy Mihos, candidate for governor, running. Charlie Baker is the Republican opponent. And then you have Deval Patrick, the Democrat, Tim Cahill, independent. You have a couple of other Democratic candidates, Grace Ross and Jill Stein. And all of them, all of you, it seems, are going to be going after Baker on those same issues. So you're going to have some interesting allies in trying to pin on him a couple of things that we hear also from the Patrick campaign. The cost of the big dig, where he had been the Secretary of Administration and Finance that helped put together that financing scheme for the big dig. Some folks say he was a wonder kid turning around Harvard Pilgrim, and others say it was, at the expense of the insureds that were paying. So it is interesting. And the third thing you talk about, you've been a real champion of removing the tolls on the pike. Now, we're not in Metro West as we film this show.
Yes.
In my district, by and large, are not, my constituents by and large are not large frequent users of the turnpike. But when you go out to Metro West, that is like the holy grail. Get rid of those tolls. So 2 questions I have. First, with respect to the sales tax. Second, with respect to removing the tolls. What would you do to make up the revenue is the first. And then the second is, does the state need to make up the revenue?
Well, can I just do the second one first on the tolls?
Absolutely.
The turnpike is segmented into the Metropolitan Highway System, which is Route 128 into Boston, the three harbor tunnels, Sumner Cal and the Ted Williams Tunnel. And then there's the...
You were on the Turnpike Authority, so you have some knowledge here.
I was vice chairman for a number of years until James
So you know about what you speak, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
And then there's the Western Turnpike that's 128 all the way out to the New York border. And that's financed different than the Metropolitan Highway System. So the Western Turnpike, 128 to the New York border, the bonds out there are right now, we can pay them without incurring any prepayment penalty at all. They're callable right now. $155 million wipes out the Western Turnpike bonds, and you have to terminate tolling on the Western Pike when the bonds are paid off.
Okay, that's from where to where?
128,
128 to New York.
all the way out to the New York border. So
we owe $155
correct.
million?
Yes.
And we pay that off?
Yes.
And pursuant to the contract, we would then have to...
Pursuant to the legislation Chapter 81A.
We'd have to remove the tolls.
Terminate tolling.
Okay, where do we come up with $155 million to
Well,
pay that
the
off?
last time I looked at the Turnpike's audited statement, independent audit, they had $500 million in government securities in cash that was basically, they could grab it today. I would like to reach in, grab the $155 million, pay off the Western Turnpike bonds, save about $7 million a year in interest charges, and then we would be able to not only take down the tolls and give people back about $120 to $130 million in a tax cut there. They've already paid for that road twice, but then we would be able to go to the federal government and say, we pay 18.4 cents for every gallon of gas and diesel in this state to the federal government for federal highway funds. Now, you could grab federal highway funds to maintain the former Western Pike, which would become a state road. Now you can't use that money, the federal funds, because it's a private road.
And then what about from 128 in?
That's the big kahuna. That's the real problem going forward. And we have
partly because some of the big dig expense was dumped
all of
on,
it,
right?
All of it, and you can't take any Western Turnpike
Do you blame Charlie Baker for that?
Well, it was his plan.
Yeah.
And in 1995, they knew that this project was not going to be $7.7 million. Weld and Salucci and their people met with Bechtel, and they told them it was going to be in excess of $11 to $12 billion back then. They never disclosed it to anybody, and that's a real problem. That is a real problem. So,
so how do you get your message out, other than the 8 billion people that watch my cable show?
Well,
how do you get your message out?
I'll be here next week.
Yeah. No, but
Yeah.
your opponent's going to be better funded than you.
Well, for the month of November, I was up on all center right-leaning cable shows, Hannity, all of the the Fox, MSNBC.
We're center here.
I know.
We invite all guests.
Tell me something I don't know. Yeah. But you can't advertise in your program, right? No.
I don't know. You know, Molly, we should check on that. See if we can make some money.
I'll advertise.
It.
Yeah.
No, I'm like,
yeah. So
we
did
we
that.
throw a plug in for Fuller Village. That's all we do, and this is a nonprofit retirement home.
All right. But I advertised the entire month of November, then went on radio statewide in December. We have real high visibility out there. It's in excess of 85% of people know who I am. I ran for governor.
Even your ads are fun and entertaining.
Well, they were. You know, we had to catch you know, lightning in a bottle in 2006. So we did the Heads Up ad, which won a lot of awards. Didn't win a lot of votes, but it won a lot of awards. But it told a story. But the question about how do we pay for rolling back the state sales tax, really, there's going to be a lot of jobs created and a lot of money spent out there on the street. But state government is just too big. In 1992, we had about 84,000 employees, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In 2008, it went up to 97,600 state employees. That's about a 14% increase, 14.9% increase on about the same base of people, about 6.2, 6.3 million people. And we adjusted that for inflation. The differential is $119 million a month. So I've said all along, we've got to cut back 10% of state employees. I'm not going to take a pension. Anybody that coming into my administration, you want to come in for public service, come on in, but you're going to have to sign a waiver that you're not going to be part of the state pension system. It's underfunded by $23 billion. And we just can't, we have to keep the commitments to those who will collect a state pension going forward. And that's what you got to do. You've got to keep your commitments. And state government has not been productive. You know, you've been there. You've seen the pressure to keep growing each and every year. And while the private sector is going the opposite way because we have to. So that's what we have to do. We have to limit and downsize state government, and that'll make up the differential.
What makes you interested in politics and in governance?
Well, you know, when you again, I said I was a son of Massachusetts, and I love it here. I would never want to live anywhere else. But I see my state going down, you know, in a power-on stall. If you've ever flown before, you know, you just really going down hard. And watching that is not a spectator sport, watching your state go down. And I've got 2 kids, like you have 5 coming along. I know if it keeps going the way it is right now, Senator, my kids and your kids are not going to have the same opportunity that we ever had.
Are your children interested in politics?
They were both government majors. Yeah, which is wonderful. You know, they see the
My father that you met introduced me to politics, and my wife had no idea until, you know, she was already, I had her hooked, you know, that I had inherited this, she calls genetic defect. And so far, we've identified it in just one of our children. So, but you think your kids could be
I don't know.
Candidates someday?
You know, they're like me a little bit. They like to stand up and they don't like to fit in at all. And we're of Spartan descent, so we die for principle. You know what I mean? But it's a great thing to do.
No time soon, we hope. How about your wife?
Oh, I met her on my 21st birthday. We've been married for 35 plus years. I think this time she's not as enthralled as she was in '06. You know, the press really took a hard line with my family and everything, and they did with Tim Cahill's family back then.
That's awful.
And you know, a lot of the talk show hosts, they're not. They're still in the blame game, basically, and we can't be that way any longer. We have to provide solutions. I'd love to work with you going forward. You're a great leader up there, and whether you stay a Democrat or you want to come into our administration, but you won't be able to take a pension.
All right. Well, maybe we'll just wrap it up. So, in summary, the Mihos administration will be frugal, independent, and fun. How's that?
That's okay.
All right.
That's
Thanks,
okay.
Bill.
Thank you, Senator.
Appreciate you coming.
Thank you for letting me on.
All right. So we have had a enjoyable half hour here with Christy Mihos, Republican candidate for governor, who is in a contested primary election, which will be held when, Christy?
September. 7 months.
September. So stay tuned. This election season promises to be interesting, to say the least. I'm Brian Joyce. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you soon.